Okay, so before moving on to VPC, another service that I want to talk about is the EBS. And for that, I need to talk about what are the different storage types which are available in your AWS. So there are two main storage types which are available to you in AWS. The first one, so the one that we will be talking right now is going to be for unstructured data, because when you are using structured data, for that we will be using a database for it. But for unstructured data, for example your photos, your videos and all sorts of things like that, we are going to be either using a block storage for it, or we will be using object storage for this. And structured data is basically all of your textual data, right? So what's the difference between block storage and object storage? So you can imagine that if you have a file of 1 GB, then in block storage, you can divide your 1 GB file into chunks. So this is divided into chunks, whereas in object storage, you say that you are not dividing it into chunks. Now, what does this basically means? What this basically means is that if I change one character or one chunk of the block storage, then I'm only modifying this one piece, and only this one piece needs to be affected. But if I'm changing the same one character in the object storage, the entire file has to be changed. Now, this is a very big difference, and this is the reason why AWS is giving you two different storage options, and you must understand which storage option you should be using for your application. So let's get back to my register. So this is what I was talking about. This is your block storage, this is your object storage. If one character needs to be updated, then only one chunk is updated in the block storage. However, the whole file needs to be updated in the object storage. Now, if you have worked on physical data centers or on physical servers, then object storage is analogous. Is it pronounced like that? Okay, I'm just gonna go with that. It's analogous to NAS, which is basically network attached storage, and object storage is analogous to DAS, which is direct attached storage. Um, so object storages are always used when your data is being written once and read many times, which basically means that you would want to use object storage only when you have, for example, let's take an example that you are creating like a static data employees application in which you are storing a lot of different employee photos on it, and you have only saved your photos once on it, and it's really going to be modified but accessed many times. So you're not modifying the file, but you're accessing it many times. For that case, you will be using your object storage. Now, the reason why the entire file needs to be changed when you're changing one chunk of your file in the object storage is because your entire file is basically bundled with the metadata, which means that if you change one thing, it needs to change everything. So whenever you want to have very little modifications, in that case you will be using your object storage, and in the cases where you will be using multiple modifications, in that case you will be using your block storage. So more frequent updated data, you will be using block storage. It doesn't has any metadata to it, and it also has low latency operations. Okay. uh, So object storage is better for large data sets, unstructured files, media, assets, static assets, photos, and can store unlimited objects. Whereas you are also using your block storage for running your OS, for example. So when you're creating your EC2 instance, when you want to actually create like or boot your OS into it, you are basically using your block storage for that. Um, Okay. Next, we are going to talk about the difference. So this was the different types: block storage and object storage. Now we're going to talk about another service which is called EBS. So that basically stands for Elastic Block Storage. Now for that, let me give you an analogy in which you have a laptop, and when you are using your laptop, it's going to come with a physical internal hard drive, and you might have an option to connect an external hard drive if you want. Now similarly, when you're creating your EC2 instance, I'm sorry for the very bad drawing, but when you're creating your EC2 instance, the internal hard drive is basically your EC2 instance store, and your external hard drive, or in this case for the EC2, is your EBS, Elastic Block Storage. So what is an instance store and what is EBS? So instance store is basically, it is like a one it's like a physical unit directly attached to your EC2. It's very fast and it can respond very quickly, because you can imagine that it's an internal storage system built inside EC2, so the access is very fast and it can respond very quickly. Its life cycle is tied to the EC2 instance, which basically means that it is ephemeral storage. So if your EC2 instance dies off, the instance also the storage instance store also dies off as well. So you can imagine, if you're breaking your physical laptop machine, then the internal hard drive is also going to be smashed into smithereens as well. um, if you want, this basically means that if you want to have persistence data or persistent data, which means that if you want your data to exist even if your EC2 instance is being destroyed, then for that you will be using your EBS for that. So it's similar to your external drives. So EBS volumes, we're basically calling this as volumes. These can be detached easily from one EC2 instance and attached to your another EC2 instance. So similarly, when you're connecting like a hard drive to one laptop, you can detach this hard drive and then connect it back to another laptop if you want. If you want to connect if you want to connect one EBS to multiple EC2s, then for that you will be using EBS multi-attach storage system. And for this, one disclaimer that I want to give is that this is not compatible with all of the AWS services. So it does have some restrictions. So we talked about what persistent storage is, which basically means that if the instance goes down, you still have the EBS volume. And if you are using the multi-attach EBS system, just note that your this will be done if all of the EC2s are in the same AZ zone. Okay. Um, So you can also create backups if you want, and that is basically done by, sorry, excuse me. You can do that by creating snapshots from your EBS volume. So this incremental snapshots are taken from the most recent changes. These snapshots are saved automatically in different AZ taken care by AWS. So you can imagine, if you are creating like backups for your EBS, these snapshots are taken from the most recent changes to your storage, and then they're saved to multiple AZ zones, and then they can be used to back up your EBS if needed. Instance store, ideally if you are hosting apps that replicate data to other EC2 instances such as Hadoop clusters. For these cluster based workloads, having the speed of locally attached volumes and resiliency of replicated data helps achieve data distribution at high performance. So you might not understand what this point is saying, because of the fact that this is going into the territory of parallel and distribution computing. So there is an option in which you can have multiple EC2 instances, and then you can divide the workload between the different EC2 instances. But when I will be talking about um, water container based services, you will understand this concept much better over there. So just ignore this point for now. And these are also ideal for temporary storage, for example, buffers, caches, or scratch data. Um, Okay, so if you want to scale your EBS, you can increase the size of volume if you want, or you can attach multiple volumes to one EC2. So you can imagine you are either attaching multiple hard drives to your laptop, or you can increase the size of your external hard drive as you want. So Amazon EBS use cases are, it's going to be used for OS, database, throughput intensive applications. Um, yeah, or for long read or write operations. Now, what are the benefits? So one, we were talking about backups, right? So you can create your backups for your EBS. This basically means that it will also have high availability because you are also creating one backup in your within your the same AZ zone, which means that if one EBS doesn't works, the copy or the backup version of the EBS is going to help you have persistent storage. So that could be either an HDD or SSD, and AWS guarantees you that it's going to have 99.9999% availability. Then it also gives you the option of data persistence, which we talked about, that if your EC2 instance goes down, you will still have your EBS volume. You will also have data encryption to it. You can have the flexibility, which means that you can change the EBS volume on the fly, increase it or decrease it without disconnecting it with the or without stopping the instance, EC2 instance. And you will be also this basically means the volume type, size, and input output operations per second. So currently the default configuration allows you to have like 6 GB input output configurations, sorry, operations to occur per second. And you can also have access management as well, which basically means that you can control policies if you want to. This point will be more clear to you when you will be learning about security groups, which I believe is now the time to now talk about this, because this is now going to be discussed in the next video of VPC. So I hope this basically cleared your entire concepts behind what is a block storage, what is object storage, what is EBS, which is elastic block storage. So you can imagine elastic block storage as an external hard drive, which you are connecting to your laptop, and your instance store is the physical hard drive, which is for your EC2 instance. And block storage is used for when you have multiple modifications in your file, and object storage is used when you are using when you want to have unlimited storage of items, and when you have very little modifications but many times it's being the file is being accessed. So yeah, that was all.